Good afternoon to all the distinguished dignitaries, respectful faculty members, dear participants, and everyone joining us virtually. On behalf of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, National Law University, Sonepat, I extend a warm welcome to each one of you to this online lecture titled Recalibrating Environmental Law of Good Governance, Justice, and Sustainability, organized by the Center of Public Policy and Resilience in collaboration with the Indian Water Foundation. Today's session is an important step towards understanding the changing landscape of environmental governance, sustainability framework, and the evolving responsibility of the legal system in safeguarding our natural resources. We are privileged to host an eminent expert whose contribution to environmental policies, good governance has been instrumental and inspiring. The online lecture begins to gather academicians, researchers, and students committed to the environmental leadership and legal innovation. Discussion today will be focused on strengthening Indian environmental law regime, the need of sustainable governance, and the increasing relevance of environmental consciousness in public policy and judicial approaches. We are honored to welcome Dr. Arvind Kumar, President and founder of Indian Water Foundation, who joins us as the guest speaker for today's lecture. Dr. Arvind Kumar is widely recognized for his pioneering work in water security, climate sustainability, and environmental diplomacy, with extensive collaboration across government, academic, and international development sectors. Thank you, sir, for joining us and contributing to today's academic disclosure. Now, I humbly invited Dr. Renu Sharma, faculty coordinate, to deliver the opening remarks and formally commence the session.
Thank you, Muskan. Thank you, Muskan. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, loudly.
Yes, ma'am.
Audible. So, very warm and good afternoon to all gathered here today. It is great privilege. It is great honor and privilege for me, Dr. Renu Sharma, Assistant Professor at Dr. B.R. Ambedkar National Law University, Sonepat, to extend a heartful welcome to you all on this special occasion. So today we are truly delighted to be in the presence of a very eminent speaker, Dr. Arvind Kumar, sir. Uh, sir, on behalf of the Center for Public Policy and Good Governance, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar National Law University, Sonipat, I extend a warm welcome to each one of you to this online lecture. Sir, at the outset, I express our deep gratitude to Professor Davinder Singh, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar National Law University, for his constant guidance and encouragement, and to Professor Dr. Ashutosh Mishra, Registrar, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar National Law University, for their support, which has made today academic initiative possible. Although they could not be present with us due to some institutional commitments, their leadership remains invaluable to all our endeavors. Really, sir, we are great. It is our great honor and privilege to introduce you, sir. Sir, Arvind sir is president and founder of India Water Foundation, a non-profit organization and think tank established for generating public awareness at national level in India and sub-regional level in Asia regarding water and its impact on human health and economic growth and environmental sustainability. Yes, the sir holds a PhD in defense studies. Sir is a renowned political commentator, frequently contributing articles on contemporary political, socio-economic, environmental, and defense-related issues in prominent journals. Sir has published over 400 plus research articles in recent years on national and international issues in reputed journals. Sir's area of interest includes integrated water, resource management, environment, climate adaptation and mitigation, nature-based solutions, along with science-based solutions, ecosystem and biodiversity, ecosystem governance, eco-disaster risk reduction, reviving culture, traditional and gentle mainstreams. Sir is also the editor of online e-magazine Focus Global Reporter published from New Delhi, India. Sir is also the lead author of publication titled SARC Outlook on Water Energy Food Nexus in SARC region, published in December 2015. And Sir is also the publisher of the ecosystem based adaptation that published in July 2021. So, Sir is also honored with various awards. Sir's achievements have been recognized by many different awards. Like Sir is conferred with the 40th Matsuri Media Award in 2015 for Sir's outstanding contribution as journalist and Triveni Award for his contribution in the field of environment and water in May 2015. Sir is also conferred with Archives Award for his exemplary contribution and commitment for protecting environment by India I International Human Rights Observer in collaboration with United Nations Information Center for India and Bhutan on occasion of celebration of World Environment Day, that is the 5th June 2017 in New Delhi. So under Sir's dynamic leadership, India Water Foundation has been conferred with Water Digest Award in the category of Best NGO Water Education 2017 and 18 and Best NGOs Water and Sanitation in 2018 and 19. So with this, I believe with this, it is impossible to mention his every single achievements because they are a lot. So with this brief but remarkable introduction, I on the behalf of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar National Law University Sonepat extend a very warm welcome to you, sir. We are deeply grateful to you for accepting our invitation and for taking time to enlighten us with your knowledge on this topic. And sir, I also believe that this lecture will provide our students a valuable and enriching perspective on this topic. So with this, these words, I welcome you, sir, again. And I would like to thank for accepting our invitation and delivering a very enlightful session for our students. Now, sir, please enlighten our students with your knowledge.
Thank you very much. So, good afternoon, everyone, uh, for this wonderful opportunity to engage with the students and faculty of Dr. Ambedkar National Law University, Sonipat, through the Center for Public Policy and Good Governance. The title of my address today is Recalibrating Environmental Law for Good Governance, Justice, and Sustainability, captures a critical influence point in India's environmental governance journey. We stand at a moment where fundamental questions about the relationship between growth and conservation, between economic and aspiration and ecological stewardship uh, are being confronted simultaneously in the courtrooms, boardrooms, and the policy chamber across the nation. Over the next hour, I want to walk you through how our constitution has evolved to impede environmental protection as both a fundamental duty and a state obligation, how our judiciary has crafted innovative doctrines to translate this vision into forcible rights, how our regulatory architecture has grown in complexity and sophistication, how it will take to make this system deliver both environmental justice and sustainable development outcomes. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the key theme of my presentation is constitutional governance, foundation, key environmental laws and recent amendments, regulatory institutions and enforcement mechanisms, judicial principles and landmark judgments, uh, and bring emerging environmental policy doctrines, implementation challenges, and future priorities. Path forward for integrated environmental governance over the. So we will discuss this. Next slide. Yeah. India's constitution is often described as a living constitution, a phrase that capture its dynamism, adaptability, and capacity to respond to challenges the framers from could not have foreseen. Justice H.R. Bhagwati articulated this idea in the uh, Kasavananda Bharati case, Kesavananda Bharati case, underscoring that the Constitution is not a static 1955 50 document, but an evolving framework that breathes with changing uh, societal needs, where in the evolutionary character more evidence than in India's environmental jurisprudence. When the constitution was drafted, environmental crises such as the climate change, chronic air pollution, river degradation, biodiversity loss, and ecological disasters were far from the center of political consciousness. The priorities of the time were nation building, economic growth, and democratic consolidation. Yet the framers embedded principles that later enabled the judiciary to sculpt a robust environmental protection regime, though they could not have anticipated the Bhopal gas tragedy, the Yamuna and Ganga pollution crisis, or concurrent droughts and floods. The constitutional design co- contained the seeds of future environmental governance. The transformation of the Article 21 is the most striking example. Originally uh, treated, treated narrowly as safeguarding physical life and personal liberty, the provision extended through judicial interpretation from 1980s onward. The courts recognize that the right to life includes the right to live with dignity, and so impossible without clean air, potable water, healthy surroundings, and protection from hazardous environmental conditions. This imperative lap made environmental protection a constitutional mandate. Polluting industries, ecological destruction, or unsafe living conditions are not merely regulatory violations but infringements of the right of life. The directive principles of state policy, particularly Article 47, 48, 48A, provide the normative fundamental for environmental governance. Although not enforceable in court, they bind the consensus of state by declaring environmental protection a core obligation for governance. Successful governments regarding of ideology inherit these constitutional commitments, ensuring continuity of uh, purpose beyond electoral cycles. Fundamental duties deepen this architecture. Article 51A G added through 42 amendment makes it a duty of every citizen to protect the improvement improve the natural environment and show Compassion to living creators uh, creates this shift environmental obligation from being solely state driven to a collective civic responsibility. Violating environmental norms is therefore not merely unlawful, it is a failure of constitutional duty. Other rights reinforce this ecosystem. Article 14 ensures equality in environmental protection and prevents discriminatory exposure to pollution. Article 19 oblique A oblique 1 protects the rights to access environmental information and advocate for ecological justice. Article 19 oblique 1 and G allow environmental regulators to serve uh, the broader public interest uh, even when they restrict certain trades. Together, these layers, fundamental rights, DP, DPS, SPS, fundamental duties, and related freedoms from the comprehensive constitutional architecture for environmental protection. India's constitution, therefore, places environmental stewardship at its core, not at the margins. It transforms ecological protection from a policy preferences into a constitutional imperative, linking it to dignity, equality, justice, and the very meaning of life. What truly uh, distinguishes India's environmental jurisprudence is not just the constitutional text, but the remarkable interpretation, innovation of the judiciary public interest litigations under Article 32, 222 to 26 opened access to the courts for citizens, NGOs, and civil society groups seeking to protect environmental commons. The judiciary recognized that environmental harm in diffuse polluted air, contaminated rivers, degraded forest, and hazardous waste affect entire communities, not just individual um, plaintiffs, PILs. Uh, Therefore, transform environmental protection into a matter of collective constitutional concern. Though these cases, the courts embedded several fundamental principles into Indian environmental law. This moved India from reactive environmental regulation to a forward looking, sustainability oriented framework. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the next slide, the application of India's constitution principles and environmental doctrines become clear when we examine the landmark judgment that have shaped the field. A foundational case in Vellore Citizen Welfare Forum versus Union Government of India 1996, which arose from extensive tannery pollution in Tamil Nadu. What began as a localized grievances evolved into a constitutional milestone. The Supreme Court declared sustainable development a legally enforceable principles and integrated the precautionary principles and polluter pay principle into India's constitutional framework. This is very important. Justice Kuldeep Singh emphasized that industrialization cannot come at a cost of ecological destruction and held that environmental impact assessment is not a bureaucratic formality but a constitutional obligation. Vellore thus become the jurisprudential anchor for environmental decision making in the decades that followed. And at the same time, MC Mehta versus Union of India 1996 further uh, deepened the constitutional grounding for environmental protection, addressing industrial pollution in the Ganga basin. The court articulated the public trust doctrine, holding that critical natural resources, air, water, forest, wildlife are held by the state in trust for people. As trustee, the state cannot alienate, degrade, or privatize these commons in way that undermine public interest. This doctrine has since protected wetlands, river, forest, and coastal ecosystem, ensuring that the state's stewardship responsibilities remain paramount. As more recent turning point in SP, uh, Muthuraman versus Union of India 2025, concerning post facto environmental clearances, the core issue was whether a project that begins construction or operation without prior environmental clearance could obtain approval retrospectively, despite the precautionary example demanding assessment before actively government notifications in 2017 and the office memorandum in 2021 enabled such post facto approvals. Over 100 projects benefited from the amnesty route. In Vina Sakti versus Union of India, Supreme Court uh, two that one struck down these provisions. Justice V. Nagaratna held that post facto clearances effectively legalize illegality and invert the precautionary principles and undermine the constitutional commitment to environmental protection. While existing clearances were fragmentically allowed to stand, the court barred any further circumvention of the prior clearance requirement. However, a review petition reopened the debate in November 2025. A narrow 2-1 majority uh, signaled that post facto clearances may be permitted in exceptional cases where the projects were otherwise eligible for clearance, environmental harm is limited or repairable, and demolition would waste significant resources. Justice Ujjwal dissent warned that this approach represents a complete return from the precautionary principles. This evolving jurisprudence reflects the core tension in Indian environmental law, balancing ecological protection with departmental reality. The doctrine is still unfolding, and the judiciary remains deeply engaged in shaping the current directive. Next slide. So let me move from the constitutional and judicial foundations to the legislative architecture that translates environmental values into enforceable rules. Environmental Protection Act 1986, overarching umbrella law for environmental protection. Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974, Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981, Forest Conservation Act 1972, and Wildlife Protection Act 1972. So these are the next slide. So at the center of this architecture is the Environmental Protection Act 1986. This is called EPA, enacted in response to the Bhopal disaster. Designed as an umbrella law, the EPA grants the central government-wide regulatory power over air, water, soil, hazardous substances, and industrial emissions, and provides the legal basis for environmental impact assessment. Its flexible, broadly worded provisions allow the government to issue notifications and rules in response to evolving environmental challenges without requiring repeated legislation amendment. Next slide. Complementing the EPA Act 1974 are the sector-specific laws. The Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974 and Water Pollution Control Act of Pollution Act created the Center and State Pollution Control Board as the primary regulatory bodies for preventing the controlling water pollution. Industries must obtain consent to establish CTE and consent to operate with board assessing likely impacts on water bodies, adequacy of treatment systems, and compliance with the standards. This consent regime act as a gatekeeping mechanism empowering regulators to deny operations if safeguards are insufficient. The 2024 Amendment Bill introduces three major changes. It decriminalizes most violations, replacing imprisonment with monetary penalties while retaining criminal liabilities for serious willful harm. It authorizes the central government to exempt genuinely low impact industries from the consent requirements to reduce compliance burdens. It also creates a justification officer to levy penalties with appeal to the National Green Tribunal, ensuring a specialized and efficient dispute resolving process. Next slide. To talk about the Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981, establishes a two-tier system of center and state pollution control boards mirroring the water pollution framework. State boards set ambient air quality standards and industrial emission limits, which industries must meet through appropriate pollution control measures. Industries are required to obtain consent to establishment and consent to operate and must install continuous emission monitoring systems for real-time measurement and electronic reporting of emissions. In 2025, the CPCB mandated OCEMS registration on a centralized portal, making a major technological shift. Regulators now receive real-time emission data instead of delayed periodic reports. For thermal power plants and other major industries, OCEMS enables instant visibility into compliance, triggering automatic alert with emissions exceed prescribed limits. This transforms enforcement from periodic inspection to continuous monitoring and real-time accountability. Next slide, please. So, about the State Pollution Control Board are the primary enforcement agencies at the ground level. They grant clearances, monitoring compliance with pollution standards, and enforce penalties for violations. The Center Pollution Control Board coordinates national policies, set standard, and provides oversight of SPCBs. SPCBs issue consent to establish CET and consent to operate. They conduct inspection, test water quality, collect samples from in industrial facilities, assess compliances with permit conditions, and impose penalties for violations. The central government significantly enhanced CPCB powers in 2025, enabling it to direct SPCVs to revoke consent in case of severe environmental threats. This addresses a previous accountability gap. SPCVs sometimes hesitated to enforce uh, stringently against powerful local industries. Local political pressure and industry Lobbying and the concern about the losing employment can constrain SPCB's involvement. Central government oversight provides a counterbalance if an SPCB is captured by the local interest or reluctant to enforcement. The central government can intervene, directing consent, revocation. This creates a backstop mechanism ensuring that environmental standards are not compromised due to local political pressure. Next slide, please. So, beyond pollution control, ecological conservation require its own legal pillars. Forest, wildlife, biodiversity, and community right received statutory protection through successive laws, each reflecting the shifting priorities of ecological justice and sustainable use. Let us now turn to that dimension. Forest Conservation Act 1980. This is Act regulates diversion of forest land for non-forestry purposes. Any change in forest use, converting forest to agricultural land, industrial use, or urban development requires central government approval. The Act establishes that forests are not merely resources for extraction, but they are protected ecosystem requiring special consent for any uh, con- conversation conversion. Wildlife Protection Act 1972. This act provides legal protection to wildlife and regulating exploited hunting. It established protecting areas, national park where no extraction is permitted, sanctuaries where limited human use is allowed, and other protective categories. The Act controls trade in endangered species with schedules listing species with varying level of protection. Biological Diversity Act 2002 and Forest Right Act 2006. The Biological Diversity Act recognizes India's commitment to biodiversity conservation and benefits sharing from genetic uh, resources. The Forest Right Act is particularly significant. It recognizes tribal and community right over forest, ensures community participation in conservation and forest governance, and facilitates benefit sharing from the biodiversity resources. This is significant because environmental protection not merely a prevention, it must include benefit and communities historically dependent on the stewardship of these resources. Next slide, please. Given this extensive law and institutional machinery, uh, a natural question arises. If the framework exists, why do we still witness widespread degradation and ecological decline? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. One of the cleanest illustrations of this gap is the environmental impact assessment system, a powerful tool when applied rigorously, but vulnerable when bypassed. The EIA framework required that before certain categories of projects commence, environmental impacts are assessed through a detailed science-based process. Category A projects require national level appraisal. Category B, category B required for projects required state level appraisal. The EIA process evolves. Baseline environmental studies, impact uh, prediction, mitigation measures, and the crucially, public consultations. The public has a role. Community potentially affected by projects have the right to be heard before the clearance is granted. This embeds environmental justice into the clearance process. 2025 Supreme Court ruling on post facto environmental clearances through now under reconsideration reasserted a fundamental norm. Environmental assessment must come before project activity, not after it. The court provided post facto clearances, holding that no retrospective approval can legitimize projects that begin without mandatory safeguards. The judgments underscores that post facto permissions create dangerous incentives. If violator can start work illegally, later regularize it, the EA system losses deterrence, encouraging procedural bypass and regulatory collision. Such a pathway erodes the credibility of environmental governance by insisting that accountability must be anticipatory rather than retroactive. The court reaffirmed that no project may proceed until its impact are thoroughly assessed, alternatives evaluated, and mitigation measures embedded. The ruling restores balance by the reminding industry and regulator alike that environmental protection is a constitutional obligation that must precede, not follow, project approval. Next slide, please. Yet, despite strong EIA norms, the judiciary clarity, we continue to see alarming headlines about the pollution, ecosystem collapse, and the governance failure. These recurring stories invite us to examine not only regulatory but the structural conditions that undermine compliances. Next. So, the very important ecosystem component, wetlands. Wetlands provide a perfect case study of this tension. They have one of the strongest rule-based protections, yet remain among the most threatened ecosystems. The Wetland Conservation and Management Rules, these rules issued under the Environment Protection Act of 1986, form the core legal framework for safeguarding ecological important wetlands in India. The architecture began with the create of state wetland authorities, uh, which are responsible for identifying wetlands, notifying them through a formal process, and preparing their long-term management strategy. The rules clearly specify activities that are strictly prohibited, such as reclamation and encroachment, landfill filling, permanent construction, and the dumping of the solid waste or untreated effluent. This provision list is essential because wetlands are extremely vulnerable ecosystems. For each notified wetlands, a site-specific management plan is mandatory. These plans operate on a 5-year cycle and focus on the restoration, donation, sustainable use, and climate resilience. At the national level, the ministry maintains a GIS-based digital inventory that ensures the scientific mapping and continuous monitoring of wetlands across the country. Importantly, the rules integrate community and the local body participation into monitoring and conservation, recognizing that wetlands are socio-ecological systems that require local stewardship. The framework is also aligned with India's commitments under the Ramsar Convention, ensuring that our national approach reflects global standards for wise use and long-term conservation. I should also add that serve on that uh, committee that drafted the implementation guidelines under the Wetland Rules 2017, where I specifically advocated for the inclusion of wetland in land records. This remain a critical reform to prevent engagement, misclassification, and the silent disappearance of the wetlands from our administrative landscape, and also advocate for ecosystem-based adaptation, means the health of uh, wetland is required. Next slide. A similar story unfold in India's waste management landscape. The legal framework is elaborate, scientifically grounded, and comprehensive across waste streams. India has established a comprehensive legal framework for waste management under the Environment Protection Act 1986. This framework is a sector specific, recognizing that each waste stream, municipal, plastic, electronic, biomedical, construction, hazardous, require its own scientific and regulatory approach. Let me briefly walk you through the six major rules that anchor India's transition towards circular economy. We begin with the Solid Waste Management Rule 2016, which fundamentally reshaped urban waste governance. The central focus is segregation at source into the biodegradable, recyclable, sanitary, and domestic hazardous waste. This single step determines whether waste become a resource or a liability. Municipal bodies are responsible for door-to-door collection and establishing composting, biomethanization, and waste-to-energy facilities. With landfilling permitted only for inert, reduce the rules also introduce user fee systems, standards for waste operations, and strict checked and processing norms through enforcement varying across states. Next, the plastic waste management rules significantly strengthened in 2025. At the heart of this framework is extended procedure responsibility and producer responsibility, and producers, importers, brand owners must register on a central portal, meet escalating collection target, use minimum recycled content in packaging, ensure traceability through QR code packaging. The 2025 amendments expand single-use plastic bans, introduce monthly reporting, tightening penalties, strict uh, virgin plastic in select applications, and raise recycled content thresholds. The challenge remains integrating the formal sector and ensuring economic viability for recyclers. The e-waste management rule of 2022 addresses one of the India's fastest growing waste streams. Producers must register, meet high collection target, and create take back systems through retailers and dedicated centers. Only authorized recyclers and dismantlers may process e-waste, following strict standards for hazardous components and metal recovery. Digital tracking, third-party audits, and environmental compensation mechanism strengthening accountability. Yet nearly 95% of the e-waste is still moving through informal channels. This is important. Workmancing here, highlighting the persistent and implementation gap. The biomedical waste management rules of 2016 set stringent norms for healthcare waste, one of the most hazardous streams, segregation at source using a detailed color coded system is mandatory, followed by treatment by incineration, autoclaving, and chemical disinfection. Common biomedical waste treatment facilities serve multiple hospitals, ensuring hospitalized handling, barcode-based tracking, and strong record keeping help regulators monitor compliance through worker safety standards need further strengthening. especially in small clinics. The construction and demolition waste rules of 2016 treat C&D waste as a resource. Developer must segregate uh, con- um, concrete, metals, wood, and hazardous components and transport them only to authorized recycling sites. Local bodies must establish or contract recycling facilities and promote the use of recycled materials such as M-cents, recycled aggregates in public works. While major cities have adopted this model, smaller towns is still struggling with the unregulated dumping. This is most important point here. Finally, the hazardous other waste rules 2016 regulate highly toxic industrial waste and govern cross-border movement. Generators must obtain authorization, maintain manifests, adhere to strict storage limits, and send waste only to licensed treatment, storage, and disposal facilities. The rules incorporate Basel Convention principles, restrict hazardous waste imports for disposal, and include FEPR obligations for used tires and used oils, environmental compensations, and illegal tariff provisions act as a strong deterrent through TSDF capacity gaps persist across states. Collectively, these rules from the backbone of India's waste governance architecture, scientific, evolving, and increasingly focused on circularity and accountability. Next slide, please. Among West regulations, extended producer responsibility stands out as a transformative regulatory shift, one that moves beyond command and control and user economic incentives and reshape corporate behavior. By making producer responsibility for end of life impact of their products, it aligns economic incentives with environmental outcomes. A producer has every reason to use recycled materials. It may be cheaper than virgin material. A producer has incentive to minimize hazardous component in products. The producer has motivation to redesign for disassembly and reuse. The producer will prioritize manufacturing of offering recycling infrastructure. EPR, a market harnessing regulation, it makes the market do environmental work rather than fighting the market. This is more effective than command and control because it harnesses the profit motive for environmental outcomes rather than merely prohibiting behavior. Current EPR application, plastic e-waste, batteries, automotive components, and non-ferrous metals, compliance is tracked through centralized registration portals and enabling transparency and monitoring. This encourages sustainable product design and ensure responsible end of life waste management. Next slide, please. And yet, even with EPR, the question persists: Is the waste truly being managed, or are we merely shift the problem? Next slide, please. One of the India's most long neglected challenge is the management of contaminated and legacy pollution sites. The new uh, contaminated sites rule 2025 finally introduced a structured system for addressing the decade-old industrial contamination, filling a critical regulatory void. India has thousands of legacy pollution sites, abandoned industrial areas, mine sites, chemical plant closed decade ago, leaving behind toxic contamination. For decades, these sites reminded abandoned, posing ongoing health and environmental risks to surrounding communities. This new framework provides a structured process for identifying, assessing, and remediating contaminated sites. It defines roles and responsibility of state pollution control boards, establishes assessment criteria, attributes responsibility and contamination, and sets timeline for remediation. Key features basically provide oversight and clear assessment criteria for determining why sites are contaminated. First, second, responsibility at attribution mechanism identifying who is liable for remediation. Timeline based mediation uh, protocol ensure that cleanup is not indefinitely delayed. This framework ensures systematic cleanup of legacy pollution sites and prevents further environmental degradation in vulnerable areas, rather than sites remaining abandoned indefinitely. These there is a now a structured process for their remediation and eventual return of productive use. Next slide, please. To ensure that these laws translate into justice, India needed an institutional capable of technical, timely, and specialized uh, adjudication. The National Grid Tribunal has played that role shaping environmental enforcement through speed, expertise, and judicial innovation. Established in 2010, is a specialized tribunal for speedy resolution of environmental dispute and enforcement of environmental laws. It combines judicial and technical expertise to address complex environmental matters, functioning to an appellate authorities for environmental disease. So between 2010 to 2021, the entity disposed of 33,619 out of 35,963 cases. This is remarkable for perspective. India's journal court system is massively overburdened with cases taking years, sometimes decades to resolve. The NGT 6 month case disposal target and is its specialized expertise in environmental matters have made it beacon of environmental GTC delivery. In its 15-year history, the NGT has disposed over 47,000 cases. Its branches sit across multiple Indian cities like Delhi, Chennai, Kolkata, Pune, making environmental justice more geographically accessible. NGT, NGT jurisdiction and orders. The NGT orders have ranged from banning open waste burning in Delhi, suspending hydroelectric projects, violating environmental norm, holding industrial polluters, and accountable and awarding comprehension to affected communities. Directly, recommendation of the Ganga River imposing massive fines on state governments for mismanaging solid waste, and fining major organizations for violating environmental norms. The NGT has demonstrated that with proper institutional design and the resource allocation, specialized environmental justice is achievable at scale. The performance metrics demonstrated that India can deliver justice swiftly when institutions are dedicated to that purpose. Next slide, please. So, about environmental protection also require governing complex, fragile ecosystems. Coastal zone represent one such frontier where competing developmental pressures require careful calibration. The CRZ rules provides that balancing architecture. Coastal areas face unique pressure, tourism development, aquaculture, industrialization, residential construction, all competing to for limited coastal land. The Coastal Regulation Zone Rules 2021 establish a framework for sustainable coastal development, and the CRZ rules establishes categories. CRZ1 ecological sensitive areas including creeks, backwaters, mangroves, coral reefs. No development is permitted in these areas. They are protected as natural ecosystems. CRZ2 limited development. Existing development area where specific industrial purposes, ports and infrastructure can be located. Development is permitted but regulated. CRZ3 existing settlements. Areas already populated, regulated development in these areas with environmental safeguards. CRZ4 aquaculture and salt pans areas designated for aquaculture and salt pans with specific regulatory requirements. CRZ compliance is mandatory for all coastal projects. Violations result in substantial penalties and projects stoppage orders. State governments are required to prepare coastal zone management plans identifying CRZ categories and permitted activities. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, parallel to the ecological governance, India is building a financial ecosystem to support climate environmental goals. The Clean Climate Finance Platform marks a major institutional shift from fragmented climate funding to strategic, coordinated, and scalable investment flow. It refers to India's newly announced National Initiative to streamline and scale climate and nature finance flows. It aims is to move India beyond a fragmented project by project funding landscape and instead enable uh, programmatic, large scale, and coordinated investments aligned with our national climate priorities. At the early 2025, India has received around 1.16 billion USD dollar international climate funds, most importantly from the Green Climate Fund, Global Environmental Facility GEF, and the Adaptation Fund. Yet these inflows remain insufficient uh, related to the scale of mitigation and adaptation required. A coordinated national platform can help channel global finance effectively and unlock greater domestic green investment, especially from private and institutional resources. The platform being shaped under the readiness program for GCF with a lean secretariat and the steering committee comprising representatives from the developing countries. It will serve as a centralized gateway for climate investments, integrating funding from multilateral resources, development finance institutions, private investors, and domestic public finance, thereby aligning with India's climate target under the Paris Agreement and other national plans. In short, this platform marked a transition from climate ambition to scalable action, from scattered funding to an integrated, strategic, scalable climate finance ecosystem. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So, as governance grow, more sophistication, uh, more sophisticated regulatory reforms must also reflect differentiated environmental risk. The Central Pollution Control Board revised criteria for white category industries. Those with minimal environmental impact in 2025. The key challenges are ahead. Pollution index threshold raised from 20 to 25. This widens the category of industries considered minimally polluting. Self-certification mechanism, industries with capital investment up to uh, Indian rupees 50 lakh may obtain consent to establish and consent to operate through online self-certification without requiring site visit or detailed technical review by pollution control boards. This is a significant streamlining. Small industries with minimal environmental impact can now comply more easily. Rather than waiting weeks for board inspection, they can self-certify online. This reduces regulatory burden while maintaining compliance. However, this approach assumes self-certification liability. There is a risk of misclassification or fraudulent declarations. Regulatory authorities must maintain audit mechanisms to verify self-certification and penalize misrepresentation. Next slide, please. So, taken together, this constitutional, legislative, industrial, judicial, and financial architecture reveals a comprehensive environmental governance ecosystem. India's environmental law has evolved from discrete regulations to an integrated framework. What began with the Water Act 1974, Air Act in 1981 has grown into a comprehensive ecosystem of laws, institutions, and judicial doctrines. This framework reflects constitutional commitment to environmental embedded in Article 21, 47, 48A, and 51A. Judicial activism through PIL, landmark cases, and innovation doctrines, uh, precautionary principle, triple principle, public trust, sustainable development, legislative sophistication addressing multiple environmental sector and emerging challenges. Institutional capacity through specialized tribunal and pollution control boards, market-based mechanism, this is called EPR, and technological innovation, OCEMS, integration of climate action and adaptation into environmental governance. Yet, as we shall see, the sophisticated legal and institutional architecture faces persistent implementation challenges. The framework is strong, the gap lies in execution. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. So after having a long discussion, we discuss how the having surveyed the constitutional foundations, judicial doctrines, legislative frameworks, and the institutional architecture of India's environmental law. I must now address the hard truth. Despite this sophisticated legal and institutional ecosystem, India's governance faces persistent and serious challenges. These are not merely technical issues, they reflect fundamental tensions in the development model itself. First, there is the issue of sector, sectoral fragmentation, multiple ministries, agencies, departments operate in silos. Environment, water resource, forests, forest industries, urban development, each pursuing parallel agendas. This lack of cohesion results in contradictory policies and inefficient outcomes. This fragmentation directly feed into the implementation gap. India actually has a strong environmental legal framework, the Environmental Protection Act, Air Act, Water Act, Forest Conservation Act, Biological Diversity Act. The problem lies not in the law, but in translating those laws meaningfully at the ground level. Next are the institutional challenges like state pollution control board, for example, remain understaffed, under-resourced, with limited field presence. Many district systems do not have adequate technical personnel, laboratory infrastructure, or monitoring capacity. Another challenge is the persistent orientation towards compliance rather than innovation. Industries are often asked to simply meet minimum standards rather than encouraged to adapt circularity, resource efficiency, or nature positive models. The system rewards procedural compliance, not environmental performance. Closely tied to this is insufficient monitoring. While recent advances like continuous emission monitoring system, drone-based inspection, and satellite surveillance are promising, the monitoring infrastructure still remain uneven across states. Many violations are detected long after irreversible ecological damage has occurred. Next, some public engagement also remain weak. Law weaken and limited community participation mean the local voices, the people who are first to feel environmental impacts, do not adequately shape uh, decision making. On the other side, the slide we see challenges arise outside the regulatory architecture. Stockholder resistance is common, especially from sectors that view environmental compliance as the cost burden rather than a value addition. Then we have weak enforcement capacity. Penalties are often too small. Prosecution is lengthy and enforcement actions lack deterrence. Delay and delusion are equally pervasive. Environmental clearance sometimes face political pressure to the fast track, resulting in weakened scrutiny. In other cases, rules themselves and periodically relaxed. Finally, interagency coordinated remaining systematic challenges. Effective environmental governance required cooperation between local bodies, the state agencies, center ministries, and the scientific institutions. Yet, bureaucratic fragmentation often leads to duplication, contradictions, and administrative inertia. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, 25. Thank you. So let me now pivotal to a critical contemporary challenge that transcends additional environmental regulation, climate action, and adaptation. While India's environmental laws historically concentrated on the pollution control, conservation, resource governance, climate change introduce a fundamentally different order of complexity. It is global rather than local. long term rather than immediate, and systemic rather than sector specific. Addressing it requires transformation across energy system, agriculture, urban development, mobility, industry, forest and consumption pattern. In response to this, India articulated a comprehensive climate strategy at COP26 in Glasgow through the Panchamatra, or five nectar commitments, an ambitious roadmap defining India's contribution to global climate standardization. The first commitment in the installation of 500 gigawatt of non-fossil electricity capacity by 2030. India is already a global leader in renewable expansion and has reached nearly 40% of its electricity capacity from non-fossil sources, well ahead of the schedule. This shift reflects not just environmental responsibility, but also industrial transformation, strengthening ecosystem for solar manufacturing, wind turbine production, green hydrogen development, and battery storage. Second, India committed that 50% of its energy required will come from renewable sources by 2030, while the first goal concerned installed capacity. This one addresses actual energy uses, signaling deep structural change in the national energy mix. The third commitment, aiming to reduce total projected carbon emission by 1 billion ton by 2030. This is an absolute reduction target, not merely a relative improvement. Achieving it demands broad-based decarbonization across energy, transportation, industry, buildings, and agriculture. Fourth, India pledged to reduce the carbon intensity of its economy by 40% from uh, 2005 levels. So, carbon intensity measures emissions per unit of GDP. And reducing it ensure that India's economic growth increasingly decouples from carbon emissions. The fifth and most long-term commitment in achieving net zero emission by 2070, unlike developed countries that peak earlier, India's timeline reflects its development needs while still contributing meaningfully uh, to planetary climate goals. By 2070, all residual emission will be balanced by carbon sinks or removal technologies. Parallel to these energy commitments, in India's plus to enhance forest-based carbon sinks by 2.5 to 3 gigatons of CO2 equivalent by 2030. Forests remain central to India's climate strategy. The target require large-scale afforestation, improved forest management, restoration of degraded landscapes, and strengthened community-led conservation. Forests not only mitigate climate change but also enhance biodiversity, regulate water cycles, and support millions of the livelihoods. Achieving this target will require expanding green cover, strengthening joint forest management committee, integrating climate resilience into forest planning, and restoring wetlands and mangroves that function as powerful carbon sink. These commitments collectively signify that India is moving from uh, incremental environmental regulation to structural economic transformation aligned with sustainability. Uh, Complementing all this in mission lifestyle for environment, which recognize that climate action is not only technological or regulatory, it must be cultural. Mission life promotes everyday behavioral shifts that uh, reduce individual and household environmental footprints, using public transport, reducing plastic consumption, com- composting waste, minimizing water use, adapting energy efficient appliances, and choosing sustainable products. It reframes environmental protection as a civic virtue and a lifestyle choice rather than a compliance burden. This is crucial because sustainable development ultimately depends on not only on the policy directives from above to but on millions of micro decisions made by the citizens. Together, together with Panchamitra commitments, the Forest Carbon Sinks Strategy Mission Life represent a comprehensive multi-level climate transition that spans national commitment, ecosystem restoration, technological transformation, and cultural change. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So, when you talk about the recommendation, means how we move forward. Recalibrating environmental law for good governance, justice, and sustainability require action across multiple domains. For institutional strengthening, pollution control boards, SPCVs, and NGT require enhanced resources, both human and financial. This is not optional. Adequate institutional capacity is the foundation for environmental governance. We need recruitment of environmental scientists, engineers, and monitoring specialists. Institutional budgets must reflect the complexity and scale of the environmental challenge. Second, simplification of regulations. While maintaining rigor, regulations should be simplified to reduce, particularly for small and medium enterprise, the online self-certification pathway for white category industries is a step in this direction. However, simplification must not become dilute. The standard should remain rigorous. The procedure burden should decrease. Third one is strong transparency and disclosure. So the environmental information should be pub- publicly available. Real-time emission monitoring data should be visible to citizens as well. EIA reports and environmental impact uh, predictions should be publicly disclosed, not merely submitted to government. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Transparency enables civil society oversight and the community participation. Fourth one, the EIA process enhancement. So EIA should ensure fulfill transparency, genuine community participation, not merely formal consultation. Impact predictions should be science-based and independently validated. Cumulative impact of multiple projects in a region should be assessed holistically, not project by project. Center state coordination should be ensured that environmental standards and enforcement are consistent across the states while uh, respecting state level variations. Shared environmental data platforms should enable information flow and coordination. Dedicated environmental finance, perhaps through an environmental corps, corpus or green bonds, could fund immediate remediation, project monitoring, infrastructure, and institutional capacity building. Market-based tools like carbon pricing, uh, tradable environmental permits could harness market forces for environmental outcomes. States should assess annually on environmental governance metrics, compliances rates, and case resolution times. Investment in monitoring infrastructure funding for environmental initiatives should be linked to performance. This creates accountability. And the Last one is the environmental governance should increasingly integrate climate resilience and adaptation, consideration, biodiversity protection, and disaster risk reduction should be pursued jointly, recognizing their interconnections. So, thank you very much patiently uh, listening to me. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for the immensely enlightening and engaging lecture. To conclude today's session, I now invite Dr. Nishta, Assistant Professor of Law and Faculty Coordinator, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Muskan. Very warm and grateful afternoon to everyone present. On behalf of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar National Law University and the Center for Public Policy and Good Governance, I extend my deepest gratitude to Dr. Arvind Kumar, sir, our guest speaker and president, India Water Foundation, for taking the time to deliver such a thoughtful and intellectually stimulating lecture today. Sir, your insightful perspectives on environmental governance and sustainability have indeed provided us with much needed clarity and inspiration. I also take this opportunity to express sincere thanks to Professor Dr. Devendra Singh, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar National Law University, for his continual guidance, academic leadership, and constant encouragement that make initiatives like this possible. We are also deeply grateful for his support and a heartfelt gratitude to Professor Dr. Ashutosh Mishra, Registrar, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar National Law University, for his valuable administrative support and encouragement towards academic collaboration and meaningful discourse. Even though both of them could not be present with us due to pressing commitments, their unwavering support has been very instrumental. I extend my special thanks to Dr. Renu Sharma, Faculty Coordinator, for her committed efforts in organizing this session and for her inspiring opening remarks. I am equally thankful to all the respected faculty members, esteemed guests, and technical coordination team for ensuring the smooth conduct for today's 1 hour online session. Finally, a warm appreciation to all my students, participants, attendees for joining us and contributing to the academic value of the session. Thank you all once again. We look forward for such participation in future academic endeavors. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, once again. Thank you so much.